Very pleased to have everybody today, and we'll introduce our guests after we get the bills here. The bills that I'm State Representative John Yates. I'm chairman of the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee, and we had listed two bills, but the one that Ms. Benefield had asked me to bring up in 2 weeks, and then since then she's called my secretary and told her she wasn't ready. So we will not talk about House Resolution 1219 today. So the other item we got on the agenda is House Resolution 1400, Congress not transfer Guantanamo Bay detainees within Georgia or United States request. And State Representative Celia is a member of our committee, and that's his resolution, and he's going to talk about it this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really passionate about this issue. Let me give you a little background on who I am. I was born on a little island of Trinidad in the West Indies, longer ago than I care to admit. But I lived in Venezuela for 15 years. And then I came to America at the age of 15. And I have all my life, from the time that I have clear memory, wanted to come to this country because of the freedoms and the opportunities that this country brings to not only its citizens and residents, but to the world. And that has not changed in my mind. We've made some changes at different levels, but what America represents has not changed. This bill that I am presenting today, I think, is a very simple bill. It's one page. We have a very insidious situation in the world today with terrorists who will do everything and anything to get their point across. It boggles my mind why a person would take their own life to kill someone that they don't even know. And what I'm saying here reflects, I remember Senator Zell Miller said something one time that has stuck with me. He was up in his cabin up in the mountains, and he was cleaning out under his deck, and he found a nest of copperheads. And he said, you know, I didn't call the local animal control officers to find out whether these were dangerous. I did not call the EPD, EPA, Environmental Protection folks to find out if they were endangered. I have 3 grandchildren, and I know what copperheads do. I know what terrorists do. I know what ideological assassins do. And what I'm asking is for us, the state of Georgia, to notify the President and the federal government that if they want to make a decision to transfer prisoners out of Guantanamo, that we don't want them here. It's that simple. Because let me tell you, in my district, we have 3 prisons. They're state prisons, granted. But in Michigan, there was a state prison that was closed, and the federal government took it over. And then the federal government was considering it to bring Guantanamo prisoners up there. So what I'm saying is I want to make a line in the sand on behalf of the people of Georgia and the American people that we don't want those prisoners here. We cannot take the chance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I would like to hear from anybody who wants to speak for the bill. Anybody in the audience want to speak for the bill, come up to the podium there. Okay. No one will speak for the bill. Does anyone want to speak against the bill. We have one name listed here. I'm not sure I can pronounce your name right. The lady there, I believe. If you go to the podium over there and give your name and any organization you represent, and then have your piece talking about the bill.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, and thank you, honorable members of the committee, the honorable representatives, for allowing me this opportunity to be here and to testify on this measure. My name is Azadeh Shahshahani, and I'm an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union of Georgia, and I'm here to ask you to vote no on this resolution, House Resolution 1400. We believe that any proposals that are aimed to restrict transfers of detainees held at Guantanamo Bay are dangerous for the United States. They pose a national security risk to the United States. We believe that it is dangerous for Congress to tie the President's hands on national security issues, and this resolution is specifically calling on Congress to halt the transfer of detainees to the U.S. We believe that closing Guantanamo is a national security priority, and attempts to restrict the President's ability to transfer or release a detainee jeopardizes that goal and needlessly impairs our national security. And I also wanted to read you a statement issued by a host of prominent Americans. It's a message to Congress from national security and terrorism experts. Blocking the government from bringing any Guantanamo detainees to the U.S. is unnecessary and harmful to our national security. And if you would allow me to read this one-page statement, I will be brief. We do not presume in this statement to address all of the complex issues surrounding the detainees currently held at Guantanamo Bay. However, the undersigned national security and counterterrorism experts agree on the following. Closing Guantanamo will be a net benefit to our counterterrorism efforts. This will likely require bringing some terrorists to the U.S. for trial, detention, or, if appropriate, resettlement. America should not be afraid to bring Guantanamo detainees to the U.S. And they continue, for millions of people around the world, Guantanamo represents the excesses of post-9/11 policies and reportedly has been a recruitment boon for violent extremists. Closing Guantanamo will eliminate an ongoing source of propaganda for terrorist effort to generate sympathy and recruit supporters. America has a long history of bringing terrorists to justice in our courts. Some Guantanamo detainees can be prosecuted for crimes in U.S. courts, undermining the terrorist myth that they are holy warriors and revealing them instead as criminal thugs. De-glamorizing terrorists in this way undermines the recruitment efforts. Nearly 60 detainees were already cleared for release by the last administration, some as long as 6 years ago, but remain in Guantanamo, awaiting agreement from any nation to admit them. Countries have indicated an unwillingness to resettle non-threatening detainees if the U.S. blocks any from coming here. Finding ways to resettle some detainees in the U.S. is essential to closing Guantanamo. And they continue, as a recent Justice Department fact sheet noted, there are currently 216 inmates in federal prisons for crimes related to international terrorism, including the masterminds of the first World Trade Center bombing, the terrorists who plotted to bring down multiple U.S. airlines, and terrorists who planned to blow up bridges and tunnels in New York. No terrorist has ever escaped from a U.S. prison. And they continue, America is strong enough to bring terrorists to justice, detain those who should be detained, and release those who should not be detained. Congress trusts the strength of our system and the steadfastness of the American people. And as I mentioned, it has been signed by a score of prominent national security and counterterrorism experts, including William Banks, who's the director of the Institute for National Security and Counterterrorism. Mr. Frank Kulufo served as a special assistant to the President for Homeland Security and is now the director of the Homeland Security Policy Institute at the George Washington University. Major General Albert Harvey chairs the American Bar Association's Standing Committee on Law and National Security and is a Major General in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. He's a partner at a law firm, and it's, as I mentioned, signed by more than 20 counterterrorism and national security experts. And again, I would like to urge the committee members to, in light of especially the statement that I just read, to consider voting no on this resolution. Thank you very much.
Chairman Burke Day has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I had more of a comment. It's not involving you. My button was pushed earlier. I was wondering if you might accept a friendly amendment to this, whereby we would ask him to keep them in Guantanamo and to allow waterboarding, skateboarding, surfing, whatever it takes to extrapolate from detainees with due cause information that would help our survival. I personally, like you, I'm a survivor. I don't like the ugliness of a lot of the things we must face, but if it's in a spitting contest of life and death, I want us to win. And of course, I'm being facetious in my remarks about the amendment, but I think this is a good resolution, and I thank you for bringing it.
Thank you. Any other questions, statements anybody has? Mr. Sayah?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify something. Madam, thank you very much for coming and bringing your point of view. We've met before, and I respect you for that and for what you do. Nowhere in this bill do we talk or take opinion on whether Guantanamo needs to be closed. Nowhere in here do we talk about or discuss any of those principles that you have alliterated. What we're saying is, if it is closed, and if they do move prisoners, we don't want them here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other members have a comment, statement of the lady? You have one?
Thank you. Thank you for your opinion on this issue. This has been a very contentious and serious and sensitive issue for this nation since the war on terror began. As a 23-year retiree from the military, serving in the continental United States and other nations, as a son of a World War II veteran, the brother of a Vietnam veteran, the uncle of a nephew who served in Afghanistan, and the uncle of a niece that's currently serving in Iraq. I want those terrorists to stay at Guantanamo Bay. In my opinion, should not be tried in a civilian court. They should be tried in a military tribunal like the terrorists they are. And I appreciate your opinion, but I just had to go on record to say that because I put 23 years donning the uniform of this nation in the military to protect and defend her. And it appalls me to see what is happening now. The state of New York has vehemently rejected it. And the President of the United States, I respect the office and the man the people have elected as President of the United States. I will continue to respect him until the people of this country decide otherwise through the democratic process that we so richly enjoy in this nation. But there's a reason the people of New York do not want those individuals tried in the civilian court. One thing we've failed to remember here, we are fighting an enemy that wants to destroy us, period. Let's make it plain and simple. I am a minister. I believe in living in peace with everyone. But I'm also a realist. Everyone doesn't want to live in peace with us. I believe in negotiation. I believe in sitting down and talking with individuals. But I don't believe in letting our guards down to the point where the enemy gets the upper hand. And this step, in my opinion, will let our guards down and give the enemy the upper hand to defeat this nation. And I will do everything within my power, legislatively and taken to the streets of America, to keep her safe. As Representative Selye stated, we have problems in this nation, but by far she is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. That's why so many people come here, because of our laws and because of the men and women who have died through every major conflict this nation has ever been in. And I think we need to hold true to honoring those memories of those men and women who have laid it all on the line, that have allowed us to live in the freest, the best country on the face of the earth. So I'm going to vote yes for this resolution to keep the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. And I would go further to say keep Guantanamo Bay open, and any future terrorists should be housed there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? It's time to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, at the proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
Right, now's the right time.
I'd like to motion to pass on H.R. 1400.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? I just say that I received a number of calls that, and I was surprised that nobody wanted to talk to me. They just told the secretary they were against it, but they didn't give any reason. But as last World War II veteran left in the legislature, I am one of 4 boys who served in the World War II. I was surprised that any opposition came to this, really, in this country, because of all this that we've done for freedom lovers and soldiers and families and so forth. And I'm pleased that it passed today, because I think it sends a strong signal. As I said, I'll say it again to the ones that came in, and I'm real glad to have had such a good, strong attendance today. Representative Clanton had to leave for another committee, but he did take time to talk to our guests. And at this time, this is the last bill and last resolution. And if anybody wants to leave now can, but what we're going to do now is we kind of had a combination here. We had invited our military people to come over, as they do every year, and kind of tell us the situation and is their job and what's happening. I know we got some stories out that some of our troops are coming home. I think we got a group down in Griffin, I know, 48th. And then anybody, we got new members since last time. If you want to tell us your background. I think you all fighting a war last time, or maybe.
I was in here.
And if you want to, appreciate you coming, Council. Let's hear from the General Nesbitt and General Britt, and you do whatever you like, sir. It's a small room, we can hear you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, it's a pleasure to come and meet with you this morning and share just a little bit about what's going on in your Georgia Department of Defense. And I will keep my comments very general this morning, and I'll let General Brett talk to you specifically about the 48th Brigade and the great deployment that they've had there in Afghanistan, and more importantly, the fact that they're about to start their return home. You all know about the Guard and what we do, and how we are the state's military organization, serve as the governor, with the governor as our commander-in-chief, and until we're mobilized to go do our federal job as a reserve of the Army and the Air Force, we are Georgia's Army and Air Force. We are the Georgia militia that serves under our commander-in-chief, the governor. And we are always there and ready to respond to any contingency, any emergency that might arise within the state. And the governor has, within his authority, the power to mobilize us in state active duty at any time to address any of those issues that might arise. So generally, you all understand that, but I would like to specifically talk to you a little bit today about the value of the Georgia National Guard in other respects to the state of Georgia. One, I think we're a real bargain for the state. Each year, the legislature appropriates in the neighborhood of $10 million to support our programs. We understand that's coming down a little bit, and we understand why, and we know we have to accept our portion of the pain just like every other agency within the state. But what I would point out is that $10 million draws down another $40 million in matching funds from the federal government, or $30 million rather, to make our total state budget, including that $30 million from the feds, about $40 million. And that program then generates through the federal monies that we receive to train our forces, about $500 million, $500 million. So in effect, for $40 million, we generate $500 million directly into the state. And that's in pay and allowances for our soldiers and airmen. It's in the products and services that we buy to support our programs. In addition to that, our soldiers and airmen pay in the neighborhood of $25 million in state taxes. That's directly payroll taxes, state taxes that go back into the state coffers in the form of revenues. So, with that $10 million we get from the state, not only do we generate $500 million, we pay, in essence, 250% interest on that $10 million annually. In terms of our soldiers and airmen paying it back in their state income taxes that they pay. So say all that to say that I know a number of you serve on the Appropriations Committee as well, and I know you're interested from the standpoint of the fact that you are charged with oversight of our organization from the legislature, and I just want to make sure that you know that you're getting a pretty good deal from the National Guard. I want to talk to you today about one program that we do out of many, and then I'll briefly just touch on the Air National Guard because we don't have an Air National Guard representative here today, and then General Britt will talk to you about the Army National Guard and what we've got going on there. And that one program I want to speak to is Youth Challenge. I was just there earlier this week. My wife and I went down and spent a couple of days at Fort Stewart, and recently went over to Fort Gordon. We were over there, I think, last week, and spent a couple of days with the campus over there. But every time I go, I'm inspired. Inspired by the cadre and folks that we have down there with these kids. I'm inspired by the kids themselves and the attitude that they have. The theme for the Youth Challenge program is dream, believe, and achieve, and that is I think captures what the program really means to those young people that are involved in it. It's a 5-month resident program Fort Stewart and Fort Gordon, our 2 campuses. And then there is a 1-year post-resident program where each student is followed up by a mentor for that 1-year post-resident program. We've graduated almost 9,000 from the program to date. And every time I go, my wife and I deliberately seek out individual students and talk to them about why they're there, what brought them there to Youth Challenge. And we had one this week, a young lady that particularly you really tugged at in my heartstrings. And this is a young lady who's 17 years old. She had bounced back and forth between Georgia and New York. Her mother lives in the Atlanta area, is a drug addict, had a boyfriend who was abusive to this young lady, and so it kind of drove her to go and live with her father, who lived in New York City. Her father was a drug addict and a drug dealer on the streets in New York, and kind of taught her the trade and taught her to survive in the very rough streets of the Bronx in New York. He was a gang member, and just a few months ago, while there with her father, a rival gang shot and killed her father in her presence. She held him in her arms while he died. And so she had no place to go. She came back to Georgia, to the abusive situation she was here, and somebody told her about Youth Challenge. So she applied and was selected to Youth Challenge, and she's been there about 1 month. And the difference that the cadre tells me that program has made in only 1 month in this young lady's life is phenomenal. She, for the first time in her life, has hope, and looks at the future with some degree of optimism. And by the time she still has a very sad countenance about her. When you talk to her, she just looks sad. But by the time she leaves there in 4 more months, her face will be beaming, and she'll leave that program with the attitude of success, and she will go out and be a success in life. In fact, our statistics show us that of the kids who complete this program, 95% of them do succeed. They go on either to the job market, to the military, or into an institute of learning in higher education. So it's a great program. They teach 8 core components in the program: life coping skills, academic excellence, job skills training, responsible citizenship, leadership and followership, health and hygiene, physical fitness, and service to the community. We've had several hundred of our graduates go into the military. We don't recruit there. We give them the option of talking to recruiters of all services, not just the Guard. And we have students out of every class that go into all services. I can't recall a single class when we didn't have at least one student go into every component of the U.S. military, to include the Coast Guard, because they're close by. They're in Savannah. We've had at least 3 Purple Heart recipients out of our graduates of the program in the last 15 years. We've had several honor graduates at their basic training or other military courses that they've attended. We had a Soldier of the Year in the 82nd Airborne Division just recently, Specialist Salvador de Lorsa. We had our first medical doctor to graduate from Mercer University Medical School, who was a graduate of the program, and his name is Joshua Logan. We had our first commissioned officer in the Coast Guard, Jason Alicia. We've had a number of officers in the Army and Air Force that graduated from the program. We've had our first attorney, Alex Sparra, who graduated from our program, and we've had a number of students who have gone on to finish college at Citadel, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Armstrong, Atlantic, University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and a number of other colleges and universities around the state. We have a very consistent GED attainment by our students. 75% of the students who finish the program leave there with their GED. That's about twice the national average. We, on average, improve their scores in reading and math by almost 3 years. So in 5 months at the school, they improve their reading and math skills 3 years, wherever they enter the program. If they enter it at the 8th grade level, they'll leave at the 11th grade level in reading and math. Wherever they are, they will improve by that degree on average. Cost is about $1,400 per student. We get 75% of that from the federal government now. It was 60-40. Because of the budget crisis that we've been facing in the states, the federal government has increased that to 75% now. So that means it's a 5-month program. We graduate 2 classes a year at each place, so that's $2,800 a bed, basically, that we pay for this program. Compare that to what it costs to incarcerate one of these folks, and again, you see it's a pretty good deal. And not only are we saving that cost of incarceration, we are producing citizens who are going to contribute to our economy rather than be a drain on our economy. So just chose that one program because it's just visited there, fresh on my mind, and I know that it's one that all of you are interested in. Now, the Air National Guard. Air National Guard's doing great. We increased from about 90% strength to about 99% strength in the last year. We're constantly mobilizing guardsmen, air guardsmen into the fight. We're sending aircraft overseas. Our J-STARS aircraft have been deployed since 2003 rather, and have been there constantly. We rotate the aircraft and crews out, but we maintain a constant presence in theater. Our C-130s are supporting on a regular basis not only the missions in theater but worldwide. We got old airplanes. Our C-130s are the second oldest in the fleet of the H models. And they're the oldest in terms of hours. They got more hours on them than any other H models in the inventory, but we're still flying them every day, still maintaining a good operational readiness rate, and we hope that the Air Force is going to see fit to give us some money to improve them, or better yet, even replace them with C-130Js, and that's our ultimate goal and what we're after. Not so sure what's going to happen with our other flying wing, the J-STARS. It's a great program. The ground folks over there, the Army and the Marine Corps, love it and love the products that it provides. But it's an old system. The aircraft is getting close to the end of its useful life if we don't get engines on them. It's being overtaken by other technology. They're satellite-based systems and smaller aircraft, unmanned aircraft, and that kind of thing that are doing similar type missions. And then we just learned recently that the Navy is replacing their P-3s with a brand new aircraft that's going to be even more capable than our J-STARS. And so we see that mission ultimately going away, and so we're actively seeking a new flying mission to replace that mission down in central Georgia there at Robbins Air Force Base, and looking at a number of different airframes to include C-17s, the refurbished C-5s that are coming out of Lockheed now, or maybe even C-27Js, which is a new airframe, twin-engine airframe that the Army had started out to get, and now is an Air Force program. So all of our air units are busy, just like the Army units, but our recruiting is good, our retention is good all the way across the board. And so thank you for your continued support, and I'll hand off to General Britt now and let her talk about the Army National Guard.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Yates and committee members. It's my honor to be here with you today. I'm proud to report that your Georgia Army National Guard is still strong and very capable. We have over 11,200 soldiers, and we're ready to perform both the war fight and the Homeland Defense mission right here in the state of Georgia or elsewhere in the nation if needed. two other programs I'd like to highlight that we've been successful in, and that is our dental readiness. And as you know, with a reserve component, it's hard to keep your medical and dental readiness at a top state. But right now, we're second in the nation, with Hawaii being first as far as dental readiness. And that's partially due, in fact, to this new program that's come out. It's called Operation Healthy Smiles, where the dentists actually come out to your armories through a national contract. And we've been able to convert over 2,000 soldiers from having dental problems to include extractions, doing the x-rays, and I can tell you, you know what I'm talking about, but it's just a phenomenal program that comes to us. So because of that, we're second in the nation for dental readiness. And we found that the dental readiness tends to be more of an issue than the medical readiness, because you can fix most of the medical issues. It's normally an immunization or a annual checkup, but with dental readiness it takes longer because teeth are harder to fix. The other program that we started is a survivor outreach program, and this is when we have a soldier that gets killed in combat, we assign a casualty assistance officer, and normally that assistance officer will work as long as they need to with the family, but probably after 6 months the immediate care situation is going to diminish, and then the family is on their own unless they reach out to us in the Guard or in the Army. But what we've recently started is a survivor outreach program where we will engage with the family members, and this will just be on a continuous basis. So we will be there for them, reach out to them, and let them know we in the Georgia Guard are still here for them. And we're leading the way in the nation with this program, with the way we're organizing it and reaching out. So it's a good news story, and our families deserve it. We're also the state of choice for new units and new missions, and recently for national conferences. We've hosted 5 conferences, an education symposium that brought in educators from all over the United States, a medical conference, a state partnership conference just a couple weeks ago, and in another 2 weeks on the 8th of March we'll be hosting a diversity conference for the nation. And again, that's great for our organization in the Guard, but it's also great for the city of Atlanta to have that revenue when you consider 500 plus people coming to each of those conferences. And that's because of the working relationship that they have with General Nesbitt and I, and the fact that they know we're going to help host the conference for them. We're also standing up a language lab at Clay, which was formerly the Naval Air Station, and it's a host site that we're doing on behalf of the National Guard Bureau. They were looking for a state to take this language lab. We said we'd do it, just give us the funding. They gave us the money, and in April we'll be standing up this language lab that'll do refresher training. It's a combat enabler, both Army and Air, for Farsi, Dari, and French are primarily going to be the languages, but it's flexible because we're working with the Defense Language Institute in California, and they're going to send out training teams to help us do this refresher training. So we're very proud of that. Currently our op tempo remains high. We have over 3,100 soldiers deployed out of our 11,200, so that is pretty high. Engineers, MPs, medical, aviation right now in Afghanistan. The 110th Corps Support Battalion is at Fort Bliss right now. They will be headed to Iraq to help with the retrograde operations. So they'll be refitting equipment primarily to be sent back to the United States. So that's a great mission for them to be involved in, using their skill set. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to speak with 6 of our battalion commanders in the 48th Brigade. We had a conference call to discuss the reintegration, some issues that we're having. I want to make sure it's a smooth transition for them between active duty back into the National Guard. And we spoke for 2 hours on various issues, but I can tell you each one of them were very excited about the prospect of getting home, proud of what they've done, because they've done great work, but really ready to get on that airplane and head back to Georgia, and excited about what the communities are all going to do for them. And they're coming in on 28 different flights, so it's going to be a sporadic redeployment starting next week and going through April to include Easter Sunday. And so it's going to be quite an ordeal, but we'll be glad to get them back home and on American soil. And again, the communities are all reaching out to each of these units and wanting to do a welcome home ceremony for them, either when the bus pulls up or at a later date at a scheduled event. So we do appreciate the support we're getting there. The 86th out of Vermont will be taking their place. I do want to emphasize, though, that the mission they're performing is still very dangerous as they phase out. We just had 5 soldiers last week that were injured pretty seriously in an IED attack. One had to be medevac to Landstuhl in Germany because of his injuries. So we continue to keep them in our thoughts and prayers and make sure, we know that they're still doing the job as they're starting to phase back to the United States. I'd like to remind people that freedom isn't free, that we did lose 8 soldiers during this deployment. Very tragic, but they're heroes, and they were doing their duty, and the families, again, are being taken care of. So that concludes my report, unless you have any questions. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and appreciate all of your support for our soldiers. It means so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I very much interested in the Youth Challenge, and I was asked a few years ago to speak to the graduating class at Macon, and I was really pleased to see that the place was packed with family and everything. And a young lady from my hometown of Griffin sang the national anthem that day, and the following week she came to my house, and I interviewed her for a scholarship down at Millersville. And I asked her, I said, how do you get in, why did you get into this thing? And it's almost like the proverbial, I went off to college 4 years, and it's amazing how much old folks learned while I was gone. And she said that she was a kind of a brat and didn't think highly of her parents' opinions or whatever, and she changed all of that, and it was just very inspirational. And we've been very interested in this thing from a budget standpoint, as you know. Bill Taylor down in Griffin. Yeah, he was in the Guard, and I think his father, he was an Army brat. His father was military, and he pesters me all the time on Youth Challenge, of course. And so I was interested in it. He was a little bit perturbed that, I believe, and you can correct me if I misunderstand this, but they were, through the federal help, the next year was going to be all right, but the current year was going to be cut. And he said, what happened to the instructors? And I didn't like the answer I got from my friends in the budget section. They said, well, that's a military problem. I said, yeah, no, it's our problem too. So did that get worked out pretty well so that you can handle it?
If we can sustain the governor's budget through the appropriations process, we will be able to sustain everything that we've got there now.
They were going to cut. We're going to cut a platoon out of each school.
In each place, but and in fact, the governor that language is in the governor's budget. But if the because of the increase of the 75% over the 60% that on the federal funding there now, if we're able to sustain close to the level of funding the governor's got there, we will be able to do it without cutting a platoon.
As I understand, this is a volunteer program. The guys can drop out if they want to, and you don't take people out of jail and whatever. You take people in this maybe
it's an intervention program. We try to get them before they get that deep into the legal system.
They have to be drug-free and crime-free.
Right.
I think it's a great program. It really is. And I've been to both places. I was at Gordon, of course. That's where I got out of the Army in World War II. But and then I visited Fort Stewart down there, the program down there. They had us down there one day. And the C-130 ride's pretty good. I took it down from Marietta, I guess. And not too happy with riding in that helicopter. That's not as smooth as my Piper Cub, I'll say that. Well, you pretty well know my background. I thought it would be good to let the various ones tell you a little bit about them, and then they can ask questions that time too, if you got the time.
Sure.
We just tickled to death to have this. Our committee don't have a lot of bills and resolutions and everything, but we pride ourselves in being very attentive to veterans' problems and what the military is doing, because we all are believers. And you can see with the testimony we had this morning with that bill, and I think we'll probably handle the other bill if it ever comes up pretty well the same way. So I don't want y'all to be afraid that something's going to slip through over here. I believe in letting everybody have their say, and I think that way that maybe it helps our cause a little bit across the way. And we're real glad to have Mike Fowler with us here. He's our ears and everything over there. And Charlene talked to my secretary, and I guess that y'all want us to put out communication on the returning troops and so forth.
Yeah, that would be
You
great.
talk to Charlene about that, I guess.
Right. Yes, please. We'd be happy to help with that any way we can. And certainly we want to keep the legislature informed too of the return of the units when they're returning and when they'll get back to your hometowns, because that's really important to those soldiers that the community turns out and that their elected representatives turn out.
We got a fine unit in Griffin, as you know, and we send them off in high style and we bring them back in high style down there. I think it's they like to pride themselves down there as the most patriotic place around. On Veterans Day, we have probably 200 American flags flying down there in Veterans Park, and so everybody, I think all of us kind of look on that as very important. And
you'd be very proud of what they're doing in Afghanistan.
Thank you.
They're the second of the 121st Infantry, which is headquartered there in your hometown, and Lieutenant Colonel Kenny Payne, the battalion commander, they are working for the Germans up in the north of Afghanistan, and just doing a great.
These are good Germans, not the ones I shot at.
Right,
okay.
Different group. That's right. That's right.
Is everybody familiar with Charlene, what she does over there? Okay. Well, we just y'all pretty well know my time in the military and everything. I was a liaison pilot and flew across the English Channel in D+30, and my troops are going across on boats while I was flying across. I had it a little easy, I guess, but anyway, it was 30 days after D-Day. There wasn't much shooting then, but and stayed over there throughout the war, and so I'm very, very pro-military. As I say, all the boys in my family served at one time or another. So we got one returning fellow here. You know him, I guess.
Yeah, we do.
And we sent him off and we brought him back. Yeah, Fiona.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I did have a couple of questions in this regard, and especially serving from the sister units in the Air Force. Speaking of the move to Dobbins, how is that going? I know we're in some transition. I have reached out to the Stark Chaplain out there and trying to work together. And if you could just give me a little bit of an update.
The transition, the move to what was formerly named Air Station Atlanta now is the Lucius D. Clay National Guard Center. Is going very well. We have occupied most of that area there now. There's one Marine Corps unit that's still left there awaiting their new facilities to be completed down at Warner Robins. But we're essentially there. We have a new headquarters building that we just broke ground on. In fact, you may have saw us on Channel 2 News with our nice silver shovels there a month or so ago. We did have that groundbreaking ceremony. The landscaping or the grading for the building is near complete, and we hope to see steel coming up out of the ground there real soon. And that building is scheduled to be completed around November of next year, November of 11. So it's moving along, and we continue as facilities become available up there, continue to move additional units and additional parts of our headquarters in. As far as the chaplains are concerned, I think Georgia, as far as the Guard is concerned, leads the nation in terms of the number of chaplains that we have. We're overstrength on chaplains, which is kind of unheard of. We have a very aggressive recruiting program for chaplains, a good chaplain candidate program that our chief chaplain, Colonel Owens, runs, and we've got I think 5 or 6 full-time chaplains throughout the state now that work primarily with our families of our deployed soldiers, and we'll be working with the returning soldiers and their families when they get back. So it's a very good program.
We got to run across your chaplain candidates last month as I was out there. One specific question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. It was one part, and I have a specific at Dobbins. One, has there been any discussion, because I was very familiar and had worked with a great deal of the drone program, the Air Force side of the house more with our Predators, Reapers, those kind of things. Has there been some discussion maybe, and I know you mentioned the C-17, which I love that bird, but to do that kind of expand that, because Robbins area would seem to be a natural place for, and especially with the communication, all you have to do is have a computer set up.
Right. We are absolutely looking at that as one of the possibilities, unmanned aircraft, and I don't know that, as that program expands, they may very well be a need to have another ground station where they control those. For those of you who may not know, those aircraft are launched in theater, but they're flown from back here in the United States by soldiers or airmen who are operating those stations at here. But yes, we are very interested in an unmanned program if that was going to become.
Because I believe North Dakota, if I'm not mistaken, the Guard unit up here at Minot is actually gotten in on some of that. And as a veteran of many second-chair computer takeoffs and landings, that's just a great program. The next one is the chapel at Dobbins. You knew this. I'm having to wear two hats here, so I'll be very careful from my chain of command as well. But where does that stand?
Well, as you know, there is a group.
Oh yes, very much so.
Yeah, that in fact, a retired Guard Chief Master Sergeant that kind of runs that group, I guess. And they're very interested in preserving the chapel. And what we have told them, and we have told the base areas, that we'll provide space on the Clay Center for the chapel if they will move it there. And once they move it and get it set up, we'll operate it. We'll provide the cost of operation. We'll maintain it and that type of thing. So, what the Air Force would like to do is tear it down. So, what I think a good compromise might be if they take the money that they were going to use to tear it down and use that instead to relocate it, maybe with some money from the group or the committee or whatever to supplement that in order to move it, then we've got a place already designated for it, and we're ready to start operating. You know where the old gas station, old service station was over on the Navy side? It's right there where that was torn down.
Well, I'm offering here publicly any help that I can be with my boss, Colonel Knuckles, and the command in that, because that has been for those who are not familiar, and this is a little bit issue, the chapel at Dobbins has a history back to General Patton. It was actually went overseas.
My general.
Your general. Yes, sir. And it went over and came back, was reassembled, and it's actually at Dobbins, has a wonderful history. And if you go inside, I invite anybody to come. I'll be happy to show you this. It is an incredible little chapel.
It is.
And unfortunately, I think some decisions of folks who've never really had the privilege of being at that chapel have tried to move it from its current location, have gave some very, in my civilian opinion, very ridiculous reasons, military as well, on why it needed to be moved. But if we can keep it there, because it's an integral part of what we do, but right now we're sort of stuck in no man's land. I PCS'd to Dobbins 4 years ago, and they had the closing ceremony on it 3 months before I got there. I preached last Sunday in it, and it's still there, but it's in this no man's land, and we don't know what to do with it.
It's what I've told the committee, and I've told Colonel Knuckles and Colonel Slick, who, by the way, have been very cooperative.
Colonel Slick's great.
In this, that we really don't have a dog in that fight in terms of leaving it where it's at. We're very happy to do that, and if the Air Force will continue to support it there, but if it comes down to tearing it down, we'd be glad to have it over on the Guard side if they can get it moved over there.
It just is an open door in both hats is whatever we can do, because it would be a true tragedy for that building to be torn down.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Celia is next.
And thank you. Generals, I enjoyed your briefing completely. I got a little story I'm going to share with you that I'm so proud of. You may know something about it, but several years ago, I'm a private pilot. I fly a Piper Comanche 250, which is a hot rod, and I love it. And I flew out of Perry Airport. There's a young black, African-American young boy, and his dad watched me several Saturdays as I flew in and flew out. I know his dad. His dad is Ike Chumley from Fort Valley State University. He's a professor, and his mom is a professor there too. And this young man watched me come in and go out. And one day I said, I guess he was about 10, 12, 14 years old. I said, would you like to go flying? And he said, I'd love it. And I said, Dad, would you like to come with me? He said, no, thank you very much. That's too little. And we flew around several times. I was back at the airport. I flew with him. He got a job at the airport fueling airplanes, and I didn't see him for a while. Next thing I heard was he's a helicopter pilot, went in the military, got the bug, the need for speed, I call it, and he flew helicopters for a while. The other day, I've been invited on April 17 to go. He's flying J-Stars now down at Robins Air Force Base. And he's going to recognize me for having been the one that stimulated him to fly.
In fact,
Major, he's a major?
He's a major.
Major Chumley.
Right. I ran into him over in theater, in fact, when I visited over there a few months ago.
Fine young man. And I'm just so proud to have that opportunity. I thank you for what you do. I've been involved with military affairs down in my district for 20 years. So I've never served. I had to pay my own gas to fly. You guys wouldn't do it for me. But I thank you for what you do, and congratulations.
Let me take just a minute, since you have an aviation interest, and I know Chairman Yates is a pilot. We have a With Youth Challenge. We've got a group that's called Wings of Eagles. It's a faith-based Christian organization of primarily retired commercial pilots that take kids out of Youth Challenge who have an interest in aviation. Wow. And send them through flight school and all the way through multi-engine instrument rating and all of that, and get them ready to go in and be a commercial pilot. And we've got two graduates of our program that are in that program right now that will be going to flight school.
That is wonderful. Congratulations. I thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. I have a soft spot for National Guard Division because I was in, I joined as a pilot, but it was 35th Infantry Division, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska National Guard, Harry Truman's old outfit. He was in artillery in World War I. I like to kids, people from time to time, and Georgia Tech invited me over to meet General Petraeus the other day, and so I had to have a little fun with him. And I said, General, you are aware that I knew he had been in command of the 101st Airborne. And I said, you're aware that my 35th Infantry Division did break into Bastogne from the south and relieve y'all. He said, it's hard for me to believe we ever needed relief. And I said, well, let's put it this way. When we got into town, you had no supplies left. But anyway, he's a great guy, and he answered questions over there for the students and everything. I've been privileged as chairman of this committee to meet some mighty fine people, General Schwarzkopf and General Dempsey and General Kupalo. I guess he got in a little trouble the other day, didn't he?
I think that's blown over.
He invited me down to Fort Stewart, but I never have taken him up on it yet. But it's as I say, it's been very interesting. And of course,
get on one of those bumpy helicopters and go down there with me. When he gets back from Iraq, I'll be glad for you to go down with me.
I'll try it again. But I'll tell you what, during World War II, somebody came down and tried to sell us on getting an autogyro. That's the kind that runs a little ways and jumps in the air, you know. But we didn't take them up. The Piper Cub's mighty hard to beat if you got air superiority, which we did have. And so it's... But it was real good, and I've had such a fine time meeting them. We was down at opened up the Infantry Museum, and General Powell was the main speaker that day, and the troops gave us a demonstration of coming down the rope from there. Were you down there that day?
No, I was not.
Yeah, it's a fine place to visit. I'm real glad we got it down there. But I just. It's such a pleasure doing business with y'all. You're so much out of this thing. I'd like to introduce, we decided to have my good friend Commissioner Pete Wheeler and his group come over at a different time so we could have more time. But we do have his sidekick here today, Tom Cook. And
we know Tom quite well.
And so if anything you want to say to us?
Honored to be before you and to hear the Department of Defense. We want to keep abreast of what y'all are doing
appreciate y'all's support.
Well, the commission and I work very close together because he's World War II also, and all of us are dedicated to taking care of the soldiers after they come home. It's a lease we owe them, and I'm all for that. It's been my pleasure working with them, and we look forward to some more time together.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate you and this committee for all you do for the Guard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.